to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli, and with me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and we are very fortunate once again to welcome a very good friend of the show, Professor Marandi from Tehran. So welcome. And this is really our first conversation since the end of the so-called 12-day war. And I guess the first thing we really all want to know is, well, what's the mood now in Tehran? What are people feeling? Is this a kind of an interregnum? Are we waiting for the next round, and when's that going to happen? And I want to add to that, there's a lot of talk about that, and I just wonder if you can confirm that or not, is that Israel is continuing to attack Iran, and there are an awful lot of strange incidents of gas explosions. And they wonder, what is this about with the gas explosions? So, Professor Marandi, the floor is yours. Perhaps you can help us find out.
Well, the gas explosions are normal. The thing is that after this war, any explosion suddenly becomes an issue for people. But if you go to the local fire station and ask them, how many gas explosions do we have in Tehran or the country, they'll tell you that it's not. It happens quite often. So I don't think that the Israeli regime right now is in any mood for a second round of fighting, especially because the Iranians have regrouped and the Israelis really gave it their best shot. They used technology that Zelensky could only dream of, and it was a surprise attack to a degree. And they had assets inside Iran. Most of those assets have been captured or killed. So I don't think the Israelis really at this stage want to do anything new. Right now, they're busy killing Syrians.
Yeah.
And so right now everyone has their turns. First, it's Gaza, Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, going back to then Iran, going back to Syria. They just kill people. That's how it works. And of course, the West will go along with it all the way. No one will get sanctioned. No one will get punished. But yeah, I don't think that any of this was the Israelis carrying out some sort of operation in Iran. In general,
go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, Sean. Yes, Peter.
Well, I mean, can you speak to at least how I understand it, that there's maybe not a debate or maybe not a heated discussion, but I've been led to believe that a lot of people in Iran were disappointed that it wasn't the 24-day war, that agreeing to a ceasefire was too early because by all accounts outside of Western media, Iran was getting the upper hand, meaning that Israel is not in any position whatsoever to carry on a conflict of attrition.
Yes, I've heard that argument a lot. There are lots of people in Iran who say that. And I think, by the way, that itself shows the mood in Tehran. People in Iran believe that they won the war. And the Israeli regime, despite, this blitzkrieg attack, killing these generals and these scientists and these academics, many of them at home with their wives and children and grandchildren and their neighbors, all taken out by the regime. And of course, Western media would call it a sophisticated precision attack, where it's like if you come to Tehran and want to find where I live. I mean, I'm not an important person, but you'll find it. There's no secret about where I live. And then in my neighborhood, if a few people watch your program or on other online programs, a few people know, yeah, that's the guy lives like this is his house. And then firing a missile and killing everyone in the building to take me out is not exactly, I think, a precision strike, or that's the Western media likes to glorify.
It's a war crime.
Yeah, it's a war crime. But Western media glorifies the Israelis always because they're tools of the empire. I think by now everyone knows that, after 21 months of genocide and Holocaust in Gaza, no one believes that it's free press or anything like that. So the mood in Iran is that we won the war. Now, why did the government stop? There are a couple of things. One is that I think, first of all, the government was saying that, we won this war, and that if we just continue, we're going to have more dead Iranians, more dead people, but the result is going to be the same. And we took hits, especially at the beginning. We took, it was a bad strike. It was a heavy blow, and the fact that Iran recovered so swiftly, extraordinary, replacing all these commanders and getting things working, of course, but still we took a big hit. And so I think one was they felt, well, we won the war, but another reason, another reason is that they don't want to just have more people die because of war. War is a terrible thing. But the third reason is that there are things that the Americans gave to the Iranians. If you recall, after the ceasefire, and you know that Bannon said that the real story is that Trump saved Israel. Israel was in serious trouble. You saw Trump say that over the last 2-3 days, the Iranians were really hammering the Israeli regime. But alongside that, Trump said Iran can sell its oil to China now.
Yep.
I don't know if you recall that sentence that he made.
I do. It's a
Why?
remarkable sentence.
I don't think it was a remarkable sentence. That was one of the concessions. So initially, when Netanyahu went begging for a ceasefire to Trump, and the Americans sent a message to Iran, the Iranians rejected a ceasefire. And it isn't a ceasefire. It is a cessation of hostilities. Iran has not accepted a ceasefire. So initially they rejected it. And then only later, when certain conditions were met, did the Iranians accept this cessation of hostilities. So what were the concessions? I don't know, but I do know that one of them was what Trump himself openly stated, which he probably shouldn't have. There was no reason for him to say that, but he's Trump, he's the guy who basically wrecked his own presidency himself at a cabinet meeting and then completed it in his Truth Social post. So, when it comes to Trump, you shouldn't be surprised about anything that he says.
Yeah, you got what you voted for. Okay.
Yes,
they did indeed.
Peter, you want to ask us, or
well, I mean, I think that given, I like your characterization of it. I mean, you took some pretty severe blows in the initial sneak attack here, but it seems very unlikely that Israel and its allies, its Western allies, are going to be able to pull off the same kind of caper again. Which, and to be fair, just objectively, as I like to say, looking at it from 30,000 feet in the air, both sides learned a lot about each other. Okay, and that's what's this thing has hardly come to a conclusion, irrespective of what Trump says or other people have to say, but that Iran has shown an amazing learning curve, and its ability to learn quickly under pressure. Now, I would have to assume that Iran is doing a post-mortem of what happened and will be able to react accordingly. And again, kind of a delicate issue. How, and I know you're not a government official, but the infiltration that was occurred. I mean, I understand a lot of Afghan workers and whatnot were involved. Oh, looks like. Hopefully,
back. Okay, great, back.
I can see you though.
Okay,
yeah, no, you're back. We can see you.
We can see
you. Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially, I mean, how is Iran preparing for round two? Because there certainly will be.
Well, I think Iran learned more about the Israeli regime than the Israeli regime learned about Iran, because Iran didn't even use a lot of its assets. But the Israelis really came and attacked Iran for regime change. This was not about the nuclear program. The nuclear program has always been just an excuse. I mean, Netanyahu, as you both know better than I, since 1992, he's always been saying a couple of years away, a couple of months away. I mean, anyone who uses DeepSeek, they can see this just in 30 seconds. He's been saying it for well over 3 decades that a nuclear weapon is just around the corner. And there's never been any, the International Atomic Energy Agency has never shown any evidence that Iran, whether even before 2003 or afterwards, was pursuing a nuclear weapon. The United States claims that Iran, after 2003, they admit that Iran is not pursuing a nuclear weapon. They claim that before 2003 Iran was, but there's no evidence for that. They've never provided evidence, nor has the International Atomic Energy Agency. And just recently, Tulsi Gabbard, before she was shut down, she too admitted that Iran was not pursuing nuclear weapons. So this was not about the nuclear program. In the case of Iran, it's always there's always going to be something. It'll be missiles, it'll be human rights, it'll be animal rights, it'll be global warming. They'll find something to antagonize.
Women's headgear.
Yeah, or it'll be terrorism or Iran's drone program. They'll always have something. And if they can have a host of things that they can use, then so much the better. But what they were trying to do was to overthrow the state. And that comes from this huge miscalculation, like in Russia, that Iran is a house of cards, this regime, as they like to call it. I mean, Jolani is not a regime. If you've noticed, his armed forces, the president, the leader, Jolani, the co-founder of ISIS, the leader of Al Qaeda, he's
yeah, I mean, but it's less than a regime because he's president of a country that doesn't exist anymore. It's really quite
amazing. But of course, he came to power wholly illegally. So the idea of calling him the legitimate government of Syria that in itself is illegitimate because he came to power through violence, through seizure of power. So there's no way you can call him legitimate, but he is deemed legitimate. Sanctions have been lifted. His organization no longer on the terrorist list, and even so, Israel continues to bomb. So all those years claiming, we have to bomb because of Iran, but now there's no Iran. Israel still bombs.
So the UN expert on Palestine, on human rights in Palestine, she is sanctioned, but the sanctions are removed for him. Cuba is sanctioned, like this tiny island somewhere in the Caribbean, which is a huge threat to the security of the United States, apparently. They're sanctioned. They're starving. They're being starved of electricity and everything that the Americans can do to hurt them. They're doing, but the sanctions have been removed from Syria. Iran is a regime. Everyone else is. And did you? I guess you saw the statement by these countries in the region that were all a part of this regime change operation in Syria. They were saying that Israel must respect Syria's sovereignty. I mean, the very same countries that helped Al Qaeda and ISIS come to power, now they're concerned about Syrian sovereignty. The masks have been removed. They've all been removed, except for those who willfully want to close their eyes, whether they're MAGA fanatics or like Hillary Clinton forever supporters, or the sectarian Salafi, takfiris. Anyone who really has any sense of morality and a moral compass, they know what's going on. They know what's happening, and so. This regime change, because again, Iran is the regime. This regime change operation meant that the Israelis had to go in with everything they had, and we have to appreciate the fact, as I said earlier, that the Israelis have everything that the Americans and the Europeans have to give. I mean, Zelensky, in his dreams, could only imagine what the Israelis have in their arsenal and what they use. And then it's not just their weapons, it is the intelligence apparatus
Yeah.
of the entire collective West, their embassies in our region, their intelligence agencies, their regional allies, their bases in Turkey, across the Persian Gulf, in the Republic of Azerbaijan. All of them are being used against Iran, both to recruit terrorists, to recruit spies, to gather intelligence. So you have basically Iran up against what, 50 countries?
Yeah.
That's so it's so
I
this
know
so this
I know what it's like.
is exactly. So the Israelis have given it their best shot, but the Iranians, they were just warming up. After 3 or 4 days, the tide began to turn, and then by the end, things were getting bad for the Israelis. But you're right, the Iranians are working 24 hours a day to prepare themselves for round two. But I think if there is a round two, it's going to end worse for the Israelis. And I think that in general, and I've said this before, I think on when we spoke together, that I think this whole 21 months has all been a catastrophe for the Israelis. And even Syria, I may have said this on your program. When Syria fell, I said back then, people can go and look at my interviews back then. I said that this was a tactical defeat for Iran, for Russia,
You said it to
and for
us.
the Axis.
Yeah, you said it to us. Yeah.
But but I said in the long run, this is not going to end well for those who carried out regime change. What happened over the last 2-3 days has shown the Israeli regime to the world. I mean, the image of some lady reading the news and then the Ministry of Defense blowing up in the back. How bad can that be? Even the Europeans, for once, condemned Israel. They're not going to do anything about it. They're not going to sanction it. But it was so bad that they had to condemn it. Then you saw these takfiris who were, they basically kissed the ring. Jolani, this, murderer, this beheader, this monster whose people would burn people alive. We all still remember the images of ISIS and Al Qaeda or Al Qaeda. Jolani went and met the Israelis everywhere, and Erdogan, this great supporter of Palestine, who's still transporting fuel to Netanyahu after 21 months of Holocaust, and who's doing trade and who has direct flight. I mean, the last time I went through Istanbul airport, there were direct flights to Israel from Turkish Airways. So, all that aside, diplomatic relations, Erdogan was trying to link up Jolani or al-Shara with Netanyahu. And in the last meetings that they had in Istanbul, they had agreements. So Jolani, who's only brave in slaughtering women and children from minorities or Sunnis who are Sufi or don't think like him, his courage is, he has huge courage in killing these kids. Just like the Zionists, they're the same thing. Takfiris and Zionists are really the same. They're the same. It's just the Zionists are the boss, and they are like the subordinates. Because we have to remember that in the dirty war in Syria, ISIS and Al Qaeda were supported by the Israeli regime. Alongside the Syrian Golan, the occupied Golan, their bases were supported by the Israelis. They gave them weapons. They treated their injured, and at times they would bomb the Syrian army when they were trying to retake territory from them. And sometimes Iranians as well. So Jolani kissed the ring. But what did he get in return? He got airstrikes on Damascus.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is really bad for Israel. It's bad for the United States.
Well, it's interesting
because
too.
it says just one sentence. It says that if you're Iran, you can't trust them. If you're Hezbollah and and Ansarullah, who support the Palestinians, you can't trust them. But if you are Turkey, if you are Jordan, if you're Saudi Arabia, If you are Egypt, that doesn't mean you're safe. Look at this guy. He kissed the ring.
Well, you just answered two questions that I had right there. Okay, I mean, obviously, I mean, from what I've been told, it's common knowledge in Israel. Turkey is next because they think they won against Iran. Now it's for the Turks. It's very interesting, the Israeli bombing of their pseudo ally friend in Damascus. This certainly is a message to Erdogan. And then the second one that you answered is that something that you said on my program. We said it at the very end. The Gulf monarchies, they should take note who they make friends with, or who believe that, or who, the people they believe can protect them.
Oh, absolutely. And usually when I talk about Turkey, I say Erdogan because Turkey is a very sophisticated country. Lots of people oppose him, even in his own party. I have friends in his party who don't agree with these policies at all. But so basically, Erdogan and the people around him, what he's been doing for all these years is undermining Syria for his own interests because he's trying to create this semi Ottoman Empire, and with Syria and perhaps parts of Lebanon and Iraq and the Caucasus as his sphere of influence. So he's sort of running in parallel with the Israelis because the Israelis want to expand their, the greater Israel, and he wants his own Ottoman Empire, but they're not. And so they've basically been cooperating with each other in undermining the resistance because the resistance is, it impedes their imperial ambitions. But the interesting thing is, and this is something the two of you know, but it never fails to amaze me, and that is that Iran did not have extraordinarily close ties with Syria before 2011. They were our friends. They supported us against Saddam Hussein, partially because they hated Saddam Hussein. We were friendly with them. We didn't have much business. There was some tourism, but the real issue was that they helped us support the Palestinians and the Lebanese resistance, Hezbollah. That was it, basically. But Erdogan and his wife, they were family friends with Assad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They would go on vacation together.
Yeah.
Yes.
They would spend the weekend together. The trade relationship was much more extensive because they were neighbors too. And then Erdogan goes and stabs him in the back as soon as Operation Timber Sycamore is declared, privately, of course, and Obama wants the Syrian government to go down. Of course, it began, Qatar and the Turkey or Erdogan, they began in Libya because Al Qaeda was first used in Libya to overthrow Gaddafi, and the Syrian and the Libyan government. We saw he died, and that, and then they went and established two operation centers. One in Istanbul and the other in Amman, Jordan. And I know Peter knows Alistair Crook because the three of us have been together. And I'm sure I know George. You know of him. I don't know if you've met him, but I was in Beirut in 2011 and 12 for my sabbatical. And most of my colleagues would go to, I don't know, North America and Canada back then, but I wanted to go to Beirut. And I worked with Alistair in Conflicts Forum during that period. And in late 2011, I don't think it was 2012, but it was in late 2011, Alistair told me that what's going on in Syria is a dirty war. I said, I don't remember how I put it to him, but I said, how do you know? Or something like that, I guess. And he said, all the people I knew in Pakistan in the 1980s who were involved in Afghanistan, they're now in Istanbul. And Alistair lost all of his funding for his seminars and so on, because of the fact that he was a truth teller in Syria. It came at a very heavy price to him, and I admire him for taking that, for being courageous. But the point is that the dirty war in Syria was something that all these countries that are now talking about Syrian sovereignty were involved in. And these Takfiri terrorists that are now in charge, if they had not destroyed Syria like this, if Syria was if the dirty war had not taken place, do you think the Israeli regime would have any success at all? Would have had any success over the last 21 months? They had never. But they succeeded in destroying the resistance in Syria and the bridge between the resistance, at least over years. It was not just now. It was like during the whole 13 years that they did so. So Erdogan's interests and Israeli interests are very similar. And that's why Erdogan has never cut off ties. That's why even during the Holocaust, he's continued to cooperate fully. Just, empty words, yeah, sure. But he sent ISIS and Al Qaeda into Syria, but he won't give a bullet to Hamas and Islamic Jihad. He'd never do that.
So I was
But
reading. Oh, go
their
ahead.
interests there are nodes of conflict between Syria, between Erdogan and Netanyahu, and that is in Syria. Who gets what in Syria?
So there's a story out now that Giuliani is sending the Takfiri to Azerbaijan. That's also being done in collaboration with Erdogan. Now, why are they being sent to Azerbaijan other than to give headaches to Iran? Do you know about this? Have you read about this?
I don't know about that. He did send these people over the war with Armenia, and they were involved. But George, if there is a war between Iran and Aliyev, he would not last 48 hours. The Azeris in Iran are more Iranian than others. And they are particularly outraged because they're the ones who keep telling everyone else that this guy, Aliyev, his airspace is being used to send drones into Iran and to bomb our cities. And one of the cities that was bombed the most was Tabriz, which is, by the way, very close to Marand. Marandi means a person from Marand. Marand is an Azeri city. The leader is Ayatollah Khamenei. Khamenei is an Azeri city. The president, Dr. Pezeshkian, was the MP for Tabriz. This is what I was going to say earlier. The West and the Israeli regime, they've always been saying that Iran is a house of cards. It's about to collapse. It's on the edge. It's imploding. It's corrupt. It's unpopular. The regime is hated by its people and all that. Sort of again, you can see the parallels with Russia and China and whoever the West doesn't like. But in the case of Iran, it's been a 40-some year narrative. So it's pretty deeply entrenched. So they go and carry out, and then they say, yes, we'll divide the country, and the minorities hate, and all that. Boring stuff. So they go and give it the best shot that they have, and what happens? Iran emerges stronger. And this is something I think is unique to Iran. And I think a lot of it has to do with Shia culture. The grandson of the Prophet, Karbala, Imam Hussein, his sister, standing up against the despot of their time in support of the oppressed, and all. That is something very deep in Iranian culture. Very, very deep. You cannot separate being Iranian and being Muslim. It's the Imam Hussein and what happened in Karbala is like probably the most important event. Its anniversary is probably the most important event in the Iranian calendar. Like the most secular people who are alcoholics, who party day and night. When it comes to Ashura, they're on the streets. They're involved somehow. It's something very deep. So when when Netanyahu attacked, on that night, people came to the streets across the country saying the government must respond, under airstrikes. And then and then on Friday, the first Friday after the war began, during the height of the attacks, there were protests across the country and in Tehran, I went to it. It was huge. And people under fire were saying, you have to defeat the Israelis. And it was, I mean, they were broadcast, people could see it. And then, so the point is that the Israelis and the Americans were saying, oh, it's a house of cards. Just kill these guards and the commanders and the leaders and it's all over. But what happened? You killed them all. Okay, but the people went and supported the guards. Now, I heard something from someone, and I don't want to name that person because he's a person in the United States that you know of, and I've never met him. I've never been on his show. But Alistair was on his show, and Alistair sent me the link, and I listened to this part. And the guy, and Alistair was saying, how people rallied, and then the other person, the guy who hosts the show, he said, yeah, like in Argentina during the Falkland Wars, where the junta was very unpopular, and suddenly the people, turned to them, and the junta. That's not how it is in Iran.
Okay, I know what your program is. I know which one.
The Islamic Republic of Iran, whether they like it or not, has a high degree of legitimacy among ordinary Iranians. If it didn't, it would not have lasted all these years against all this antagonism and maximum pressure sanctions. But what this war did was it made it even more popular, and the intensity of the popularity increased. And by the way, two things happened during two events that made the leader seem completely vindicated, even in the eyes of his critics. A, we were negotiating indirectly with the United States, and they were conspiring against us. So in the past, when he always said, I'm skeptical of the United States, and a lot of these younger Iranians were saying, the riots that we had 3 years ago, and I said this before, had more to do with this than anything else. It wasn't about Mahsa Amini. I mean, there never was footage to show that she was hit. She was struck by anyone. Actually, the footage that was shown of her showed that she was okay and that she wasn't hurt after she was at the police station. She didn't show any signs of being physically abused. But that aside, the real issue was that a large segment of the younger generation who didn't see the revolution, who didn't see the Shah gunning down people on the streets and with U.S. support, who didn't see chemical weapons and Saddam Hussein and the chemical weapons being given to him by the West, who only experienced Iran under sanctions. And many of them were saying that, these guys, they're the problem. They won't negotiate. They won't compromise. They have this old grudge, and they're ruining our lives. They just won't get over this. Instead of compromising with Americans and having it'll be like Switzerland. I don't know if Switzerland's any good, but anyway, it'll be like Switzerland in like a couple of years. Literally, that's what many of these young people think. I teach at the University of Tehran, and my faculty is one of the two most liberal faculties. It's English literature. You can't get much more liberal than that. So these young people, they saw that Iran was negotiating and the Americans were conspiring, and they saw that it wasn't just Fox News that was egging on Trump. It was the liberal media, the good guys. They saw CNN talking about sleeper cells in the United States. Where are they? Where are all these Where are these sleeper cells?
I guess they're still asleep. Okay.
They're still asleep. So this woke people up. And by the way, what happened in Syria was also a wake-up call to those who were still asleep. Because as I said, kissing the hand, a lot of these young Iranians who thought, well, if we negotiate.
Well, I think you might have already answered the question, but the way Iranian domestic politics is framed in the West is that you have reformers and then you have the hardliners. Number one, is that a correct characterization? And if it is true, the reason why I'm asking it is that because of NATO's aggression against Russia, it killed the liberals in Russia. They're gone. You can't find a liberal anymore. Okay, at least they don't speak out. Okay, because Western aggression has unified the political culture here. Is that a correct assessment of what's going on in Iran?
I would, to answer the first part of your question, I would say that Iranian politics is very fluid, and that there are no two camps. There are many different camps, and they sort of gather around poles. And I would say that many of the reformists are not pro-Western. Some of them are. Many of the so-called hardliners are very moderate, but but also critical of the West, and some may be extreme. So you're going to have extreme components, but and you're going to have a lot of people in the center too. And the center is very critical of the West. The center is very critical of the West. And after what happened to us in the 12-Day War, those liberals, as you pointed out, they've shifted their position, or they're quiet. Many have shifted their position. Some of the best commentary that I've seen in the last couple of weeks, actually the best that I've seen, comes from a liberal. You wouldn't know him. He's never been, but anyway. So he did an interview on TV. He was never a government official, at least not in recent years. But he gave a very good. It wasn't on TV. I think he was at a news agency. I'm not sure. But he did he spoke very well. So, but that's really interesting, because you mentioned something about Iranian politics, that there's some sort of divide in Iran, whereas in the West we're told that it's this supreme leader. The supreme leader apparently is like Trump. Trump can get up in the morning and say 130% tariffs. Who in Iran could do that? The leader and the president, all of them could never make such a decision just like overnight.
But the real or alleged enemies of the West, for some reason, Russia and Iran are very, very different countries and very different histories, traditions. But all the enemies of the West, they're monolithic. They're all monolithic. Okay, which is just illusory. Okay, and the plurality of ideas here, I'm sure, matches pretty much what's going on in Iran. But you have to have this monolith. It's so easy. It's easy to find. It's easy to characterize, and easy to make it a target.
Just as a joke, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. A couple of semesters ago, I had a class, and I had this student who said at the beginning of the semester, he said, Iran is in class. I mean, the class had nothing to do with politics. It's literature. But he said Iran is it's a police state worse than North Korea. And he went, not ranted, but he said some things, and it ended. Next week, he raises, he asked me a question about something that had to do with class. And I said, "You're still here?" And he said, "Yeah, I told him to arrest you." But my God, I think they arrested someone else by mistake. And this poor kid, every time he'd open his mouth till the end of the semester, I said, "You're still here. What an incompetent secret police." I guess they've executed the other guy. So, and by the end of the semester, or not by the end, like after 2-3 weeks, he began to understand that, this propaganda that you're, as an 18, 19-year-old kid, that you're hearing day and night from this Persian media in the West. I mean, all you have to do is open your eyes. Just look around, and what the United States did and the Israelis did in the 12-Day War was they opened up everyone's eyes. And the unity that I see today in Iran is very similar to the unity that I saw when Saddam Hussein invaded Iran at the behest of the United States and the West. And and all that. And what happened in Syria was in reinforced that, because again, these pathetic takfiri monsters, I mean, these despicable monsters, they kissed the ring, and still they bombed them. I mean, what's happened? And by the way, why do you think? Why would the Americans and the Europeans and these regimes want the most extreme elements to come to power in Syria? These takfiri people who are so intolerant. In my opinion, from the very beginning, the Israelis and the Americans, their plan was to bring these people to break the country apart.
Yeah.
Because they cannot tolerate the minorities. And Syria is full of minorities. You have the Kurds, you have the Alawites, you have the Christians, you have the Druze, and you have Shias, you have Sufis, you have Ismailis. It's a very diverse country. So you bring someone in to balkanize Syria. So you bring these monsters, these Wahhabi monsters. I mean, in Qatar, the biggest mosque in Qatar is called the Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab Mosque. And this is who these guys are. This is who these people are. Forget the facade, but the reality is something very different. So Israelis want these people in power. So what do? They go and slaughter the Alawites. They take women as sex slaves. They go and bomb Christian churches, and then they don't even apologize, or the statement given by the government is like insulting. And then look what happens with the Druze. They push the Druze. They push these takfiris, these Jolani. They push the Druze as far as possible into the arms of who? The Zionists. Now, most of the Druze, from my understanding, are opposed to the Israeli regime. But the Israelis do have their people, and some other people may be out of desperation. And both sides during this battle, they've committed atrocities. Both these takfiris and some of these Druze groups against innocent people. Syria must not be divided. And any conspiracy to divide Syria has to be rejected, and they must fight against that. But the point is, who is the best person to put in charge to break up Syria? The most intolerant person. And that's what the West did. And foolish sectarian people who've been brought up to be sectarian. By whom? By, in the 1980s, Saudi Arabia, all of these Wahhabi schools, and more recently, after Mohammed bin Salman moved away from the Wahhabis and is doing his own thing, it's now Qatar and Turkey, and which is very sad, because in the late 1970s, as you know, before the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, Carter and Brzezinski conspired against the Soviet Union in order to encourage the invasion, in order to create a Vietnam for the Soviet Union. And back then, in order to defeat the Soviet Union, they promoted extremism. And so the first takfiri school books that were published were actually published in the United States by the University of Nebraska, Omaha.
All right, he'll come back. We'll get him back. Don't worry.
We've been doing well.
Have you?
Hey, we did really well. Okay, I hope you'll come back. Okay, but
yeah, I hope so.
Everyone,
but it is an interesting issue how with this the Takfiri and then Israel suddenly, we're the champion of the Druze. That's these we love the Druze. We're not going to tolerate any kind of atrocities against the Druze. So we just simply bomb in this. He's coming back.
Okay. Right to protect. Okay,
Exactly.
We filled in the lines. We filled in the lines.
But is Israel suddenly the champion of the Druze? We're shocked, horrified by the atrocities against the Druze.
Where do we go from here? Because one of the things my program and what George and I do on this podcast is trying to balance or deal with narratives that are spewed by Western media and politicians and ground it into reality. So when we look at the framing of Iran in the West, the IAEA comes up now, and I think we're all in agreement that this conflict, this war, we'll call it the second 12-day war, or what it will have something. Where are we right now in that? Because Iran must not enrich, okay? And then Iran says,
Right,
well,
but and that's the
IAEA,
reason.
hang on, George, let me
Yeah.
finish.
Okay.
IAEA is not welcomed here. So, George, you want to chime in before?
Yeah, because now there have been two major reports, one in NBC, one in the Washington Post, that says the damage to the three nuclear sites was actually quite minimal. Like other than Fordo, that they say was damaged, but only set back by a couple of years. But the others, on Ifshahan and Natas, that was minor damage. So in other words, they say within a few months Iran can have them operational. Now I tend to think that they're laying the groundwork
That's
for
right.
the next round of attacks, because now they say, well, Iran is now back enriching, and therefore, in the view of Trump, if you enrich, that means you're moving towards nuclear weapons. So, are we on the way to round two?
I mean, you can look at it in two ways. It could be uh, Trump, but it could also be opponents of Trump who want to see Trump forced into war because Trump said he destroyed everything, and they want to say that no, you didn't,
Okay.
and they want to push him into a reckless war so that he I mean he's very popular because of what he's been doing over the past few days over with his base. He's not he's right now because of his what he said at the cabinet meeting, and then what he said on Truth Social. He's not doing well at all. So why not destroy his presidency further by pushing him into another war? I mean, which is worse? This you know uh, this crisis of legitimacy that Trump faces today, or Monica Lewinsky? Well, when Monica Lewinsky came out, Clinton used airstrikes and on countries like Sudan and Iraq to distract attention away from his,
And, and
what he
Yugoslavia.
was
Yeah,
doing with
And
Iraq, Sudan, and
Yugoslavia.
and
Yugoslavia. Yeah.
Yugoslavia, yes,
Okay.
Yugoslavia too. I mean, he bombed a pharmaceutical factory in Sudan, which probably he killed tens of thousands of people or maybe more as a result because of this lack of medicine that he created. So Epstein being infinitely worse for Trump than Monica Lewinsky for Clinton, there definitely would be an incentive for him to, create another crisis in order for him to escape this. I don't think he can. I think
Well,
Epstein is.
but I don't think that Iran will be alone on the menu. Russia is also on the menu, so it'll be a two for one. It's one of the things that I constantly remind people is that the United States and Israel can always escalate. I've been told so many times when it comes to Ukraine, oh, this is over. They're winding it up. Trump is going to. No, 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 no. We're going up the escalation ladder, and we will go up the escalation ladder with when it comes to Iran. But that will be at the behest of the West. That will be at the behest of Israel and of the United States.
Yes, but I would also add that I was just saying this to another friend. And I was saying that, Epstein, what he did, of course, is horrific. And I'm pretty sure there are it's very horrific. But I'm pretty sure there are other Epsteins out there, by the way, as we speak, that Western intelligence agencies are using. But I think that if you remove the last 21 months of genocide, and we had this crisis with Epstein, I think the damage would have been for Trump, but not so much for Israel. I mean, if they said it's Mossad, and they say, well, that's bad. But after 21 months of genocide, the mood across the world has changed. The mood in the United States has changed towards Israel. So now when people say the Mossad that is carrying out a Holocaust is also I don't want to say the word on your show. I don't want to cause trouble for you. Is also doing this to girls in the United States to capture donors and politicians and whoever. This link between the Mossad and Epstein now, after what Israel has done over the past 21 months, is far more significant in the
Well,
eyes of
all we
ordinary
have to do,
Americans.
all you have to do is look at Tucker Carlson's speech at Turning Point a few days ago, the Charlie Kirk outfit. Um, Charlie is a true intellectual embarrassment, but he allowed Tucker Carlson to say it. Loudest cheers during that event was for Tucker Carlson calling out Israeli intelligence. Like he said it right out.
Exactly.
The only person that there had the guts, I think Dave Smith also was very
Oh yeah.
clear. But I mean, Tucker made it very clear that, and George and I have observed that Israel is not a popular topic right now in American politics. Okay, I mean, it doesn't mean they're not. It doesn't have a hold. It certainly has a hold, but. Talking about the no daylight between the United States and Israel, that's not a popular meme right now.
So it's not only
Yeah.
that Israel isn't popular, but I think what was remarkable about the 12-day war is how little support there was for the war against Iran. I mean, that was the remarkable thing. So after all the 40 plus years of demonization against Iran, there was no support. There was none. Even
George, there was
Trump's
this
supporters, there was no support for this war.
George, there was this online song that like I don't know, like they say a billion or over a billion people watched called Bomb what I don't
Bomb,
forget Bomb
bomb,
Tel
was it
Aviv or something
bomb
like
Iran? Oh, no,
no
sorry.
Tel Aviv.
Oh, no,
Tel
I didn't
Aviv.
know this one. Yeah. Okay.
People across the world were siding with Iran.
Well, and
And it
also,
was
and we had in the UK, death to the IDF.
oh yes, yeah. At a
What's really
concert.
interesting. What was really interesting about that is that the British elites were outraged, but nobody asked, well, what does the public think? Nobody asked what the public thought, but it was on the
Well,
elites.
as I said, there are quite a few Epsteins out there. And that's why I think those who oppose Western policies and they're young should be careful about who they go out with and what they do.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, but it's also, I think the Epstein story, it's a metaphor for narrative control. Who has the right to control the narrative? And this is just another. We could go to RussiaGate, the Hunter Biden laptop, we had COVID,
All of it.
the march to the war in Ukraine, and all this. There is a breaking point here. You do not have the right to control the narrative. We're part of it as well. And the Epstein story, whatever is true about it, is so obnoxious, and it's so demeaning for America firsters. Okay, because
Oh yeah.
you
And
can't
then they
have.
tell them, look away, there's nothing to see here. Go away, be quiet. That and this is what I wanted to say, that they may want to restart the war with Iran, but they're intensifying the conflict in Ukraine, which is coming to a head right now. I mean, the Russians are going to push hard. They are intensifying the trade war. The tariffs are back. They have a crisis at home with Epstein and the multi layers of corruption. It's not just sexual corruption. The corruption in the political establishment is all sorts of things. Some of them are Epstein, some of them are sex, some of them are financial. But the regime is corrupt. This is not a United States that can go to war with the world and to tell its own people to shut up at the same time and expect to win. So, we're not in the 1990s. The United States is not the what was it? The hyperpower, as someone once called it. And the world is a much more complex place. So I think that if there is a second round, it will end far worse for the Israelis and the Americans for all these reasons, because the empire is just falling, and this will only act as a catalyst to make things worse. As I said, what happened in Syria, I don't see it as a win for Israel. I can understand why Netanyahu would do this. I mean, he delay his trial. Maybe it can help him have a ceasefire in Gaza to make him look strong. Maybe he can have greater influence in southern Syria, this greater Israel. But I think in the long run, all of these things that we've seen in Lebanon, in Yemen, with Iran, in Syria, and most importantly in Gaza, and of course there's the West Bank, all of these, when you put them together, they've destroyed Israel. People hate Israel. This is anecdotal, but there's this guy in Spain who had this restaurant, and he kicked out these Israelis. And then he said, Labbaik ya Nasrallah, I guess he's Lebanese or anyway, pro Hezbollah. And then after he kicked them out, and he said, I'll whatever you did, you ate, you drank, I'll pay for, just go. His restaurant is packed with people now. Not Muslims, not Arabs, everyone. Because, and this is what I find so encouraging. Jews standing up against the Israeli regime. It was Tucker Carlson and who at that conference?
Charlie Kirk.
Well,
No,
Dave
not
Smith.
Charlie Kirk.
Dave Smith.
Sorry, Dave Smith.
Oh, Dave Smith. Okay.
is a Jew.
Mhm.
Dave Smith is a Jew.
Mhm.
You have so many Jews standing up to this. You have Christians, you have Muslims, you have white, you have Hindus. The young lady at MIT, I would imagine her name, I think, was a Hindu name. You have so many people from all walks of life, from all different countries, standing up, protesting in Seoul, on the other side of the world, in Australia, a world away. This Israel has destroyed itself, and it may last a few more years, but a human being who's despised by everyone is not going to last very long. A regime that's despised by everyone is not going to last very long.
Even Georgia Maloney couldn't take it with this the recent attack on the Roman Catholic Church, the one Roman Catholic Church in Gaza. Even
Gaza.
he had to speak out again and said this is unacceptable. And this is indeed. I mean, so the other day, even was the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, absolute fanatic. He had to raise the issue about an American gets beaten to death. He's beaten to death by settlers. So can you imagine how terrible this must be that he has to address this and say, demand the Israeli government conduct a full investigation. And then Marco Rubio says, well, we're really on top of this. We're going to, we're absolutely going to get onto this with Israel. But that's enough of an embarrassment. So you've got Roman Catholic Church and an American citizen gets beaten to death. I mean,
and that's not the first
time. Not that they care.
Not the first time this has happened over and over and over.
Absolutely. But it's now
it's the fifth. I think it's the fifth American. It's the fifth American, I think, who's been murdered over the past 21 months, and they don't care. But the situation is so bad, exactly. And the image of Israel is so so destroyed that now Huckabee, who, in my opinion, he would be one of the people who'd batter this American to death himself. He's that sinister.
Well, metaphorically, he did. Metaphorically, he did.
That's right, and he does it every day. But the point is that the image of Israel is so bad in the United States that they cannot behave like they did 2 years ago. They thought that they could, go on with this genocide forever and exterminate the Palestinian people. But they didn't understand that the world is woken up as a result of their crimes. And the world is this is not going to be forgotten, because every day it solidifies the animosity towards this regime. I hate it, and then tomorrow they kill more kids. I hate it further, and the day after they kill more kids. They just keep doing it. It's just not going to go away. It's never going to be forgotten. They are the Nazis of our time. They are worse than the Nazis because back then people didn't see this.
Yeah,
Whatever
they
the
hid it.
Nazis did, there was no cameras. They were not doing it live in front of a global audience and then telling us that they had every right to do so. Yeah, it was somewhere in the corner, and then afterwards you see a few black and white pictures in the history books. That's it. They're doing it like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You wake up with these images, you go to bed with these images. The world has changed, and and then their apologists. Their apologists are despised. Their supporters are despised. So that's why people like the U.S. ambassador, they have to say something because Americans are outraged.
No. And Marco Rubio has to say something in front of the president, and the president, oh, yeah, we're going to get a statement on this tomorrow. Much
Yeah,
as
well, the Israelis are very good at investigating themselves. They have a good
Oh yeah.
record of investigating themselves.
and then they issue a statement such as Netanyahu's statement on the Roman Catholic Church, which was so perfunctory. It's about, I don't know, 10 words. And after all the expectation, the White House, oh, well, we're going to get a statement from the Israeli government. And it was nothing. It was just almost like disdainful that, Netanyahu, well, why do I even have to bother issuing any kind of a statement?
Well,
But
also,
if you
also
look
the
at the Western media, so look how the Western media, even though they are completely sinister and they are complicit in all this and they are partners in all these crimes, but look how the Western media has changed. Remember when they bombed the first hospital? The Western media said, "Oh, the Israelis said this was a, I don't know, Islamic Jihad rocket or something, like some small rocket is going to kill 100 people or 200 people or 300 people." And then the Western media ran with that. And then Western intelligence agencies, the French intelligence, the American, like CIA, the MI6, they were all saying it was the Palestinians. All fake. But now what do? They can't do that anymore. No one's going to buy it. So they just don't talk about it. They don't tell you about it. And if they do, they say, well, the Israelis say that this was a mistake. The Israelis say that this was, they can't do it. Why? Because the world won't accept it. The world just doesn't care what they say. They know they're lying. They know the Israelis are lying. They know that the Americans are lying. They know that the Europeans are lying. And that's in the West where they know they're lying. In the rest of the world, now they have their own media. The Chinese have this is not 30 years ago where you had this CNN where you could watch across the world and that was it.
yeah.
China has its own media. India has its own media. Brazil has its own media. Russia has its own media. They can send reporters to Iran. They have their own way of discovering what's right and what's wrong. The West doesn't have, they still have influence, but it doesn't have the sort of media influence and soft power through that media that they had 30 years ago. That's ended. And then through the genocide, they've destroyed their credibility, which has demolished the media as well.
And one of the other and very important changes is generational, because if we just look at the United States, I mean, you can look at young Republicans, young conservatives, and they are aghast by what they see. Okay, and they're at loggerheads with their leadership, which the APAC has Congress all under their thumb, but that doesn't translate into. I don't like to say that the base, but I mean just people that are politically aware. And if you're a conservative, your reaction is going to be similar to someone that is much more liberal. There is a huge generational shift going on right now. And what I was going to say earlier is that Donald Trump constantly is whining about too many people are being killed in Ukraine, but he can never say that about Gaza, can he? He can never say that about Gaza. And people pick up on that. They pick up on it. And they see the rank hypocrisy of it. In the United States, if you look at in the legacy media, it's inside baseball, Republicans, Democrats. The younger generation could care less about that parlay. Okay, they're not interested in that because what they see is the duopoly doesn't do anything for them, and that's why this Epstein story has legs in their mind. Okay, I'm not talking about the merits of it, but the way people perceive it. Okay, and Gaza is such a wake up call because, like you said, you go to bed, you see this, and you wake up in the morning, and you see this. Younger people, they're not tied to pieties like the boomers of my generation.
Exactly. And you live in Moscow. I've been to Moscow multiple times since the Ukraine war. George knows Russia better than I. In Russia, do people say, yeah, these Ukrainians, they deserve to die. They are subhuman. No one said, I've never heard a single person even say anything similar to that. But people know across the world what the Israelis say about Palestinians, what they say about other people, how they compare them to Amalek. They know that overwhelmingly the population supports genocide. So when Trump says, oh, the Russians are doing this, people have this very sophisticated understanding of what the reality is. They don't just see the hypocrisy, they see him as sinister. He's hiding a genocide and trying to remember South Africa, the genocide in South Africa. People see that as sinister. The United States, they're destroying they're destroying their empire, like in a way in which if I was trying to, if I was like an infiltrator in the White House and they listened to me, I couldn't have done it better. I mean, look at what he said at the cabinet meeting. I mean, about Epstein. Are you still talking about Epstein? And then his Truth Social post, which I still don't know, I can't comprehend how he actually posted that. I mean, I couldn't have done a better job to undermine the regime.
Yeah, you don't call your supporters morons. They don't appreciate it.
Yeah, I sort of thought that may be the case.
But anyway, Professor Marandi, this is as always, a really fascinating, intriguing conversation. Thank you very much for giving us your time and
Well, George,
allowing
I
some
wanted to
insight
mention,
into
I
what's
wanted
going
to
on
mention, I wanted to mention
in
before
Iran. Yep.
I wanted to mention before we end here, Professor Marandi was talking about how everything media-wise was monolithic at the hyperpower of the 1990s. We're so gifted, the world is gifted that we have you in the 21st century to break that monopoly. And you do it every single time. You're one of the most famous people in the world right now. I said it. You are one of the most famous people in the world right now because you speak truth to power, and we appreciate it.
We
You're
absolutely
very
do.
kind. I learned from you and George, and I whenever you for the last, I don't know, 14, I don't know how long ago it was where you began crosstalk, but that's where I began to appear on television, and I've always been learning from you and George, and I'm just a teacher of literature, but I
Well,
try
we
my
we
best
we
to.
definitely learn a great deal from you, and and inspired by you, inspired by
You're very
your
kind.
moral courage and your intellectual forthrightness. So really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and we look forward to
Thank
speaking to
you.
you again very soon. All the best.
Me too. All the best. Bye for now.
Bye bye.